So it seems that the Heretic Astartes have hit the tournament scene and started strong. Let's take a look at the detachment and the units that won a grand tournament. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Chaos Space Marines. In this video I thought we'd do a roundup of some lists that are looking strong for the faction, with some of their best tournament results so far. Take a look through what good players are taking to bring home the wins for the Chaos Deities, and a few of the detachment and unit choices that make them good. This past weekend has been the first one in which the new Chaos Space Marine Codex is majorly active. Most big events hadn't been running the new Codex beforehand due to waiting on the points from Games Workshop, and I was certainly interested to see what might be initially doing well for the Heretic Astartes and round up a bunch of army lists. It seems that over the past weekends they won not one but two small grand tournaments straight out of the gate, so certainly implies that the Chaos Marines are top tier competitive. And as quite a lot of people were expecting, the most popular detachment by a fair way is the Renegade Raiders. It did seem that that one would be the most easily to use general purpose one, adding both mobility and damage. It's definitely early days though, and it will be fun to see if people do manage to make some of the rest work. I'm sure people will be experimenting with some of the rest. A few of them have some really interesting and powerful moves, if maybe aren't quite as easy to use some of them. Just as a quick aside before we start, I thought I'd just quickly mention that the Dread Talons box set appears to be back in stock in Element Games in the UK. I know a lot of people missed out on this when it first went live, so it might be of interest to some of you. The link will be down in the video description if you'd like to check it out. Anything bought through that does help support the channel. In any case though, let's take a look at some Chaos lists. Let's jump right into it and start out with the list that won the biggest tournament. This army list was run by Steve Trimble, who used it to take first at PNW Warlords Clash, going 5 wins to no losses against a field of 39 players. Quite apart from the actual Chaos Space Marine list, I must admit I was kind of surprised to take a look through the army list played. Looks like he wound up playing Orc Bully Boys literally 4 times out of 5 games. That must have been a bit of a repetitive experience, and while Orc Bully Boys might be one of the army lists to beat in Warhammer 40k right now, it's not even like it was particularly enormously overbearing at the tournament. There were only 4 Orc players in the 39-player tournament. It just happened that he went through all of them. And it's not like they dominated the other top spots either. The max that they won out of any games was 3. Orc slaying antics aside, the list uses Renegade Raiders, so that's advance and shoot, all weapons gaining the assault keyword, an extra AP against enemies on objectives, which is quite a nice bonus. Certainly makes things like chainswords and accursed weapons with AP 1 or 2 far more punchy against anything that's relying on a good save to keep them safe. And most of the stratagems range from either really quite good to absolutely great. There's advance and charge, re-rolling hits and wounds when your unit jumps out of a transport, an armor of contempt equivalent that's a battle tactic, and an interesting one allowing you to fall back 6 inches right at the end of the fight phase, so it could be a way to get Warp Talons back in reserve, never mind just being a generally useful fallback and attack type stratagem. Overall, just a lot of good stuff and options. For the units chosen, there's Abaddon the Despoiler, who I'd guess will be heading up the big unit of 10 chosen. Not impossible that he could be being run with the cheaper Legionaries, I guess, though. It's been one of those 2 squads foot slogging across the board, and Abaddon can provide his reroll aura of full hit rerolls. Maybe in turns where damage dealing isn't as important, you could get a 4+ invulnerable save for things nearby. That could help with his own squad safety, I guess. Either way, his unit's going to be fantastically dangerous with 10 Chaos Marines, Dark Pacts, and the Despoiler himself. He also helps with farming a bit of command points as he goes about doing Dark Pacts. Then there's the Chaos Lord with Demon Hammer and Fist. I guess he'd probably go with the other unit of 10 for some nice free stratagem access there. He could trigger the rerolls to hit and wound after you jump out of a transport, which could be pretty excellent for Chosen in particular, though it'd work well with both. And then there's 2 Masters of Executions, one with the Mark of the Hound, the enhancement that gives the bearer's unit scout 6 inches. That could be pretty nice on one of the 10-man units to make sure that squad can get into the midfield, and you can attach him alongside other characters. His damage buff is also fairly easy to trigger as well, getting you to reroll all hits if the target's damaged at all, as he could chip off a bit with firepower. Then for the actual squads they're leading, there's 2 Rhinos to transport some combination of 10 Legionaries, 10 Chosen, and 2 units of 5 Legionaries into battle. The Legionaries take their customary heavy melee weapons, the big unit takes Las Cannon and Reaper Chain Cannon, the smaller ones both take Reaper Chain Cannons only, and they get their inbuilt wound rerolls against things on objectives. The Chosen get their inbuilt advance and charge, have 2 fists, 2 paired cursed weapons, and a bunch of combis and plasma pistols. I guess they would be quite nice for the full hit and wound rerolls, getting out of a transport with the Chaos Lord in particular, and having advance and charge. They've got a huge threat range. Then we've got no less than 2 units of 10 Warp Talons, and absolutely terrifying units that can jump in, kill something, and then warp off the board. Pretty hilarious how much non-interactive damage they can do, and Renegade Raiders helps them out more than most, potentially getting AP against things on objectives for yet more damage dealing, and also that stratagem to allow them to fall back at the end of the fight phase, which means that even if they didn't kill their targets, they could still get away. Otherwise, there's 10 Cultists to grant some sticky objectives, and finally rounding up with 2 Venomcrawlers. Really just very nice, general purpose, anti-infantry mauler type things. In this detachment, they'll both love the extra AP against things on objectives to bring them to strength 6 AP 2 damage 2, and the advance and shoot certainly doesn't hurt as well, meaning that they can move really quickly to gain lines of sight on things. Overall, looks like a pretty dangerous and terrifying list. Looks like it certainly has enough threats to see off the Orc Bully Boys multiple times over. The Feel No Pain and the extra war threat of the Mega Knobs not being able to overcome the sheer amount of damage that this can do, I guess. Overall, looks like a terrifying example of what the new Chaos can do. Taking a look at a few specific units, the Legionaries are pretty much auto-include at 80 points, objective control 2, usually with chainswords, an icon, and a heavy weapon of some sort, plus 2 heavy melee weapons, and then they get to reroll all wound rolls against things on objectives, and it just makes them all around great. Reasonable enough defense with the marine profiles. Objective control 2, so they can easily take objectives, and a lot more damage than you'd expect for a faction's basic troops. Given the reroll wound rolls to attach characters is pretty nice as well, and they often tend to be fielded out of rhinos. Chosen still seem to be absolutely fine at 125 points. Not too surprised to still see them being one of the go-to elites versus things like Possessed and Terminators after the points and rules changes. They do seem to be nice in Renegade Raiders in particular for that big hit and wound reroll stratagem after disembarking from a rhino. And again, just a nice combo of lots of damage with those accursed weapons in melee and alright defense with 3 wounds at toughness 4. To lead them, the Chaos Lord perhaps has this one as maybe his best detachment for the free stratagems, given battle tactics for the rerolls 1, armor of contempt, and precision on objectives if he needs it. 90 points seems to have him in a pretty nice place, and interesting to see that he had the option of the Demon Hammer or Power Fist in this loadout, depending on whether or not you want to hit on 2s or gain devastating wounds. His other big thing is going into Rage mode once per battle for big Strength 9, AP 3, and Damage 3 attacks. That's something that enemies really can't ignore. Finally, for some core threats in Rhinos, the Master of Executions does seem to be being played more post-Codex. It's not really changed that much in just a general purpose fighty character with precision that has a fairly easy to trigger damage boost of re-rolling hit rolls. I think he's just breaking through a bit more versus Lords, partly because not every single detachment has got standout amazing battle tactics, though you can certainly combine him with another character in the same unit if you want something utterly terrifying for a single squad. Moving on, we've got the revamped version of Index Chaos Marines in the Pactbound Zealots detachment. This was the other Chaos Space Marine army that won a grand tournament this past weekend, this one run by a James Carmona, using it to take first at Broadside Bash Revived 2024, going 5 wins to no losses at a 33-player tournament. Looks like his win path was playing against 5 different flavours of power armour, World Eaters, Ultramarines Ironstorm, Thousand Suns, Grey Knights, and then standard Space Marine Firestorm in the last round. Certainly Grey Knights and Thousand Suns are really challenging to overcome at the moment. The Pactbound attachment is kind of similar to the Index version, though the Dark Pacts did get toned down a bit. You take any mortal wounds that you need to before dealing any damage of your own. And if you fail the Dark Pact test, then you don't get the boosted bonus attributed to the mark, things like the Nurgle sustained hits on 5s. Still pretty powerful though, with some really nice stratagems, particularly the Nurgle hide things from view 1, Slanesh advance and charge, and undivided full rerolls to wound. This list seems to be going heavy into Nurgle and Slanesh out of them though. Seems there's 2 Chaos Rhinos, each with a single Chaos Lord and a small squad of 5 Legionaries in it. The Lords take the Demon Hammers, the Legionaries have the heavy melee weapons, chainswords and a las cannon. They're all marked with Slanesh for being able to advance and charge for 1 CP. And when they get into melee, due to that icon allowing them to re-roll the Dark Pacts test, they'll be able to get sustained hits on 5s more often than not. All very scary stuff with the Lord's once per game damage boost, plus the re-rolls on objectives. Then, interestingly, for more objective pushing units, there's 3 units of 8 Accursed Cultists, 2 of them Slanesh with advance and charge access and the sustained hits, and 1 with Nurgle for the ability to shield them from view when needed. Interesting to see going heavy on these. They did get a bit cheaper in the points updates, going back down to 85 points, and they get their sort of surge move thing where if you shoot some of them dead, then they can move into close combat, potentially making them annoying to skirmish with on objectives, and they can get there quite quick with Scout. Then again, we've got 2 units of Warp Talons, super nasty with their kill something and then jump off the board. You might just have to be a bit more careful about what you engage in the Pactbound attachment, and one of these is marked with Slanesh, one of them with Nurgle, again for the stratagem. Then beyond that, there's some pretty serious firepower, 2 Predator Destructors with las cannon sponsons, 2 Forgefiends with the triple ectoplasma cannons, all of them marked in Nurgle, and then 1 Hellbrute, which is the one that can give you both the sustained and the lethal hits on your 5s and 6s. That one's also Nurgle aligned and takes a missile launcher and multi-melter. Really quite a terrifying firebase there. You certainly can't afford to have big important units out in the open against that little lot. Finally, there's 1 unit of 3 allied Nurglings, always handy to have for a little bit of screening, particularly if you've got lots of scout moves, or could deep strike for objectives if that's not so much of an issue. Good to see that the Pactbound Zealots is still very usable, even if it did take a couple of hits. It still did broadly look like one of the stronger ones. I still think it is one of the ones that has the most fun rules out of the codex, even if it was the index one. I do quite like the options that the different marks give you. It does seem that theory marries up pretty closely with what's good in practice, as the Warp Talons do seem to be being used en masse. They're pretty much auto-include at the moment with their given rules, and I wouldn't be too surprised if they get some sort of nerf in the future. They were kind of alright before the codex, certainly weren't weak in any case. They move fast and they hit with a whole bunch of attacks, 20 attacks out of a unit of 5 of them at strength 5, AP 2 and damage 1, all with twin links and maybe extra hits with sustained hits from Dark Pacts. In the codex they gained that special rule where if they were in combat and then find themselves out of combat by the end of the turn, usually due to them having slain their enemy, they get to go back into reserve. So the idea is what you do with them is throw them forward, claw to death an enemy unit on the outskirts of the army, then go into reserve. They can then rapid ingress in the opponent's next movement phase, drop down onto the board, and prepare to do that all over again in your turn, provided you put them somewhere safe, and attack something that 10 Warp Talons can reasonably bring down, though that really is quite a lot, particularly if you combine a little bit of firepower to soften up the hardest things. They are a little bit borderline broken at the moment, even if they do have a few weaknesses like Overwatch and strong indirect fire. I'm absolutely unsurprised to see top players using them as a bit of an auto-include unit. I guess we'll see whether Games Workshop does anything to that Warp Strike special rule when they do Codex FAQs and things. Otherwise, for some more notable units from that list, the Chaos Predator Destructor still seems to be doing well. Just a very nice general purpose gun turret with access to sustained hits. You've got las cannons, an auto cannon that gets extra AP against infantry and things, plus a havoc launcher and combi weapon. All very nice with the Dark Pacts, and gets better both in Pactbound with Nurgle for more sustained hits, or in Renegade Raiders for advance and shoot and extra AP on objectives. You could be getting that scary auto cannon all the way up to AP 3 against infantry on objectives, really nasty against any sort of elite 3 wound infantry. Otherwise, kind of cool to see Accursed Cultists still doing well. They feel kind of appropriate for the Pactbound one. A sort of medium tough unit of objective skirmishers that now can scout into the mid-board and then jump into combat when they get shot. They are enough of a threat that the opponent just can't really afford to ignore them too much, with most lighter things as well. The Torments put out quite a bit of damage with around about 5 or 6 attacks each, all at strength 5, AP 1 and damage 2. Otherwise, to take a look at a bit of variety of what other players are running, here's a second Renegade Raiders list. This one run by Tyler Walsh, using it to take 6th at the Thylacine Cup, going 4 wins to 1 loss against Grey Knights. This one's going with 3 Rhinos, 2 sets of 5 Legionaries, and 2 units of 5 Chosen, and then 2 units of 5 Havocs. I guess they might well start in the 3rd Rhino potentially, and some Chaos Lords present to back up either the Legionaries or Chosen as needed. As mentioned before, all those can make great use of things like advance and charge, extra AP against objectives, and the big reroll stratagem for when you disembark from a transport. Otherwise, 15 Warp Talons this time, 1 of 10 and 1 of 5, still some Cultists to mark objectives and things, and then maybe the standout of this one is a trio of Vindicators. Just fantastically efficient datasheets at 175 points in the first place, They'll love advance and shoot with their slightly shorter range and get good value out of extra AP against really high save things, so lots to like there. While they're at 175 points, Vindicators are still looking like they're going to be a very useful unit. Toughness 11 with 11 wounds and a 2+ save is really tough if you're in cover. The Demolisher Cannon does the dedicated anti-tank but isn't useless against elite infantry with the blast keyword and plenty of shots, and Dart Packs can give you sustained hits. Kind of nice that they can push forward fairly aggressively as well and not have to worry about getting locked up in close combat. They're able to fire in melee. Otherwise, Havocs still seem usable at 120 points. They're not as hard to kill as some of the other big gun tanks, and they'll feel every casualty, but certainly bring the damage. They can move and shoot with ignores modifiers on big units of las cannons or potentially chain cannons, as we saw here. I guess getting 4 of those with the transport disembark rerolls seems particularly scary, and then they could move pretty fast when they're on the board as well to gain further lines of sight. Next up, I was wondering if the Soulforged Hunting Pack would have many people playing it. I didn't notice any that had done well in big tournaments, at least in the past weekend, though I did see this one that was in a team event called Da Gathering 2024, run by Matt Robertson from Art of War. Team event lists can definitely be a bit different and are often more playing for certain matchups as opposed to just literally being played for take all comers, but this one certainly looks like it would be pretty terrifying versus the field. It looks like that team event had a lot of very good players in attendance. The Soulforged Warpack is the Vashtor flavoured detachment, the one that can get you +1 to wound with your guns at range, or get a +2 attacks in melee, though it does mean that you're a bit more likely to take damage with your dark packs, though it looks like the damage trade-off is worth it versus the very nasty things that the vehicles can do. They've also got some other helpful support, such as moving vehicles through terrain, reactive moves for certain vehicles, one stratagem for boosted AP, and one command point to get you to possess a vehicle, which could give you access to the demon vehicle boosts for the rest of the game. It looks like utilising those big damage boosts. There's a trio of Forgefiends with the triple ectoplasma cannons, with access to +1 to wounds. They're going to delete basically anything in the game given a turn or two. And then to back them up, 3 Venomcrawlers with their more anti-infantry sort of firepower, again with +1 to wound. That just becomes very general purpose, and the weight of fire is going to strip some wounds off basically anything. Then there's a Mauler Fiend with the Magma Cutters, nice and cheap and an enormous threat that can't be ignored, and then 2 Predator Destructors with the Las Cannon Sponsons. Not sure if the plan is to demon possess them for 1 CP a turn in the first couple of turns, or whether they'll just be cheap and effective gun turrets as with elsewhere. Then to guide the monstrosities into battle, there's 2 Warpsmiths. They're the ones that can give you +1 to hit and heal D3 wounds. One of them takes that very powerful looking Tempting Addendum upgrade, and that gives you a small 3-inch aura of reroll hits for any demon vehicles within range, though you do take extra mortal wounds if you fail the Dark Pact. With that and the trio of Forgefiends, it means that monstrously powerful ectoplasma fire would basically be hitting pretty much all the time, and then with +1 to wound as well. They definitely could be taking a few mortal wound blows in return, but that is just spectacular amounts of damage. The other one uses the Invigorated Mecha Tendrils, which is a +4-inch movement. I guess that could help him keep up with the Soulforged Warpack when he needs to. Isn't too bad to fill some extra points. And the Warpsmiths can be kind of handy with their pseudo-Laurent operative type protection to allow them to get to objectives and things. Otherwise, there's the mandatory 10-strong unit of Warp Talons, which couldn't be outweighed by more demon engines in this list still. They really are that good. A cheap unit of 5 Raptors with 2 Melter Guns that look like they would be a good unit to drop in and do secondary objectives and things. And 1 unit of 10 Cultists for some sticky objective goodness and to provide some expendable bodies for the backline maybe. Finally, there's 1 unit of 3 Allied Nurglings, again always good for a little bit of screening and could help with secondaries. Looks like of all things, the only draw that the list had against was Cavalry Heavy Astra Militarum, which is kind of wild. Just on the raw numbers and damage that the army can put out though, it looks utterly terrifying. Loads of vehicles with sustained hits and +1 to wound. You need to be removing lots of vehicles as soon as possible, otherwise they're going to delete huge chunks of your army. For perhaps the 2 most popular demon engines, the Venomcrawler's 110 points. This guy's really quite efficient and I think is good in most of these strong detachments. Soulforged Warpack's obviously great for the +1 to wound, but extra sustained hits in Pactbound and the extra AP and advance and shoot in Renegade Raiders both seem great as well. They're not really all that tough for the cost at 12 wounds at toughness 9 with a 5+ invulnerable save, but they do spit out a whole ton of anti-infantry style fire. 12 shots at strength 6, AP -1 and damage 2 is pretty threatening at range, and they back that up with 6 of the same in melee. It's quite a strong profile for handling certain targets, like say maybe Orc Boys with a Pain Boy attached, or any sort of 2-wound Space Marine or lighter. Otherwise, Forgefiend still seem to be popular at 190 points, usually fielded with triple ectoplasma cannons. They're just fairly threatening against anything in the game. 3d3 blast shots at strength 10, AP 3 and damage 3 is utterly ruinous to elite infantry, but given they've got triple blast it means that they're still good against hordes and they have enough strength and damage to threaten medium vehicles as well. Give that +1 to wound and they'll threaten heavy stuff pretty efficiently as well. Finally, last but not least, we've got one more Renegade Raiders list, this one by Ben Eisenhoff, who uses to take third at Wild Hunt GT, going 4-1 against a 29-player tournament. For this one, I'll mainly focus on the differences. Perhaps one of the biggest ones is that Vastor's managed to find himself a place in the army. It doesn't look like he's here for any sort of demon buffing type special rule. It's just literally here for his damage output and datasheet strength. He does get 6 attacks at strength 14, AP 2 and damage 3 now, plus a sweep attack that's okay against low saves and is quite hard to take down given that he's got 14 wounds with a 2+ save, and if you shoot him from within 18 inches, then enemy weapons gain the hazardous ability. Cool to see that Vastor the Archifane is being put on the board in actual competitive lists. Games Workshop seem to have done enough to make him solid but not overpowered. Otherwise for this one we've got one Master of Executions and a Chaos Lord. They're heading up 5 units of Legionaries, piling in 2-3 Rhinos, and 1 unit of Havocs looks like he's joining them with the las cannons, maybe using that reroll stratagem when they get out. There's just a restrained 2 units of 5 Warp Talons this time, maybe playing a little bit more cagey and deleting smaller stuff. 1 unit of Chaos Bikers with 2 Melter Guns and a Power Fist. I may be a little bit surprised not to see a few more lists running these guys. I think they're kind of great, but admittedly they are competing with both Warp Talons and with Legionaries and Rhinos for the sort of fast-pushing sort of unit role. And then other than that, we've got 2 Predator Destructors, going heavy on the Cultists this time with 3 units of 10 for a lot of chaff and sticky objectives. Going heavier on the Nurglings with 2 units of 3 for some big screening and secondary things, and then this time 1 unit of Rubric Marines as well. To be fair, they could also be an interesting choice to put in transports. They could be pretty threatening with their Warp Flamers and threaten a bit of Overwatch 2 potentially. Having them get up to better AP makes them even better with objective skirmishing as well. Overall, cool to see another take there. Their only loss was to Necron's Canoptek Court round 2. Finally, for the unit focuses, I thought it was worth mentioning the Cultist mob. They did lose a bit of fun factor in the Codex without being able to access their firearms and grenade launchers and things anymore, but in general they still really are top tier and competitive. Most of the list runs at least 1 copy of these. 50 points just for 10 cheap guys with the sticky objective type rule is enough, even if they're going to be super unthreatening, even more so than before. Ideally they want to put the sticky objectives on your home field objective turn 1, and then either be screening units to stop enemies getting into the backfield, or potentially move forward to try and put the rule on a midfield objective that's fairly convenient if it makes more sense and the opponent isn't going to be trying to threaten to move to your home field too much. Still room for the little guys, even with some very efficient Legionaries on offer it would seem. In any case, first impressions are looking like Chaos Space Marines are doing rather well. Renegade Raiders is certainly having the most success. I'll certainly be interested to see if a few more people manage to take up the Soulforged Hunting Pack or anything else. They do look like there's some other fun builds that you can do with the Chaos Marines. Look forward to hearing all your thoughts down in the comments below, including any other insights as to how these armies were run. I'm sure I'll be missing things with a relatively new codex and a lot of lists that I don't know exactly how were played. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new 40k videos just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep these coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.